A very good morning and welcome to Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're going to start with some breaking news in the last couple of minutes. You may remember a story over the weekend about a British couple, Craig and Lindsay Foreman, who had been detained in Iran. Well, in the last couple of minutes, we're hearing from the Reuters news agency via an Iranian news agency that those British nationals have been charged with espionage. So that is that Craig and Lindsay Foreman, who were on a motorbike trip to Australia, part of a global kind of trip holiday, if you like, were detained in Iran. They have now been charged with espionage. The family at the weekend said they were significantly concerned and distressed at the situation. We also know, of course, that the Foreign Office had been dealing with this issue. They were aware of the issue and that they were engaging with the UK government. But as I say, those British couple have been charged now with espionage, Craig and Lindsay Foreman. We'll have more on that story as we get it throughout the day here on Sky News. Now, you may have seen in the headlines, we're talking about how the fact that ministers are meeting representatives from the farming industry this morning to talk about the government's planned changes to inheritance tax. Farmers say the changes could end up putting many of them out of business. Well, they are holding a press conference in central London. Let's have a listen into what the NFU and other farming representatives had to say following that meeting.
Everybody's agenda. This should matter for 70 million people living on this island, and they don't care about food production and what this means for food production going forwards. So, yes, we are really cross today. And I hope that the government will recognise that there is still an opportunity for them to engage properly and meaningfully in moving forwards. What I think is really important for all of you to understand is that we went to Treasury solution. We recognise the fiscal hole that the country faces, and we recognise the challenges that the government are under. And the solution of the clawback was originally proposed by Dan Needle a couple of months ago. We've modelled that. We believe it's relatively revenue neutral. So when in recent days the Prime Minister has been out there saying that this is a choice between an inheritance tax and funding the NHS, we know that's disingenuous to start. £500 million, not over the £170 billion that it costs to run the NHS. But there is no choice, because we are offering them a solution that still raises the funds. But at the moment, the door is shut from Treasury because they believe, and the government believe, they are right. So the reaction from our members is going to be one of fury, one of real anger, one of desperation that we've seen over recent months. And it's what we all feel here today. I'm now going to hand over to Victoria.
I'm going to use this and turn it on. It's on. Okay, it is on. I think that we went into the room knowing that we had a workable solution to everybody's problems. The clawback, which we set at 7 years, but would have been very prepared to talk about in the term of that. Could it have been longer? We went in with very open minds, and the four of us also to talk about every aspect of the industry, to make sure that the tenants and the landlords were represented. And I know George will say more about this in a minute. There are issues to do with farm tenancies which are just wrong. There is no way that they should not be re-examining how best to deal with farm tenants who can only claim business property relief, who don't have the assets to sell to meet that debt, and then have the chance of failing the succession criteria because they don't have enough money. It's just wrong, and the landlords for those tenants are very happy to raise our voices on their behalf on this. I also raised this policy is operating in some kind of vacuum. Apparently we don't employ people who will be affected by this. Apparently we don't employ other businesses to come and do work for us. Apparently the rural economy will not be damaged by this action at all. But we all know that this is a pebble in a pool. They talked a lot about the 10-year exemption from paying interest. I think they know nothing about how our businesses work. They know nothing about that year 6 cash flow crisis that you have, which means that despite this incredibly generous option the government have given you, you miss a payment. And that thereafter faced with a 9% interest charge on that debt. Very generous of the government indeed. So I looked around the room and I thought, I'm not sure that there's anybody in this room who really understood when Tom was talking about what a balance sheet looks like. I didn't think there was anybody in the room who knew what profit and loss looks like. They were just adamant and deaf to what we were trying to say. And I think we all came out slightly with boiling blood about it, because we offered them a solution which has the same outcome, or nearly the same outcome as the one they're looking for in the clawback, which makes you feel that there is ideology running behind this. And I haven't wanted to say that before today. I've really not wanted to think that this is ideologically driven. But the money isn't big enough to justify the attack on our industry.
George Dunn.
Thank you, and thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to be. Oh, sorry, let's use this one. Yeah, thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to be with you at this really important press conference. So, one of the things which I said at the meeting today was that the 30th of October announcements were a shock, and they came as a bit of a blow to the industry. But we heard three things. We heard that they wanted to raise revenue. We heard that they wanted to find a mechanism to stop wealthy individuals hiding their wealth from tax. And we heard that that they wanted to protect hardworking farm families. What I said, and I think what others agreed, is that they have introduced a system which makes the situation for wealthy individuals looking to hide tax easier, because they haven't touched capital gains tax. In fact, they've increased the rate of capital gains tax and kept rollover relief in place. And they've allowed half-rate inheritance tax on estates up to £1 million. So what's not to like if you're new money looking for a place to invest your wealth to hide tax? And they haven't done enough to help hard-working farm families. And I would venture to suggest that on this side of the table here, we've got organisations and professionals who understand a bit about the industry and can provide a framework for the government to understand how they need to be protecting vulnerable and hard-working farm families, and we don't believe that they've gone far enough. But we've offered the opportunity for the government to use its forthcoming technical consultation on trusts to widen out the scope of that consultation to look at some of those technical issues, but they were clearly unprepared and unwilling and arrogant enough to say, we've done all the thinking, we don't think we need to ask any more questions, job done, we're not making any changes to this policy. So it was one of the most unproductive meetings that I've ever had in my 28 years as Chief Executive of the Town Farmers Association, and that's no understatement. So the battle continues, because we do think that they have got this severely wrong. And for my sector, the tenanted sector of agriculture, we are inundated every day with members of our association who tell us that their landlords are saying to them, quite reasonably, we're going to have to sell your farms in order to raise money to pay the tax that will be due. And therefore, those farm businesses who Rachel Reeves said she was trying to protect are completely unprotected, because they have no option whatsoever but to follow along with their landlord's tax planning situation. Thanks very much.
And now Jeremy Moody.
Yes, I'm Secretary and Advisor to the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers. CAV members act for and advise landowners and farmers across the United Kingdom. And we've done a lot of work on the data as to what the actual impact of this is, who it will affect, that to give a clearer understanding. Because points coming out from today are that the government is still not recognising that it hasn't got a full picture. The data it is using do not present a full picture of the impact of these proposals. It still will not recognise that there are a significant number of farmers, including those who are wholly tenanted, who can only claim under BPR and are outside its statistics. There will be people who are business partners, where land is not a partnership asset, who will be outside their statistics. And so it goes on. So they're undercounting the people who will be affected and underestimating the value at stake because of the guidance that's given by HMRC on how to report business valuation. The office, and indeed, look at the figures that the government actually itself relies on. They say those figures are robust. They're certified by the OBR. Go read the OBR report. What it certifies, to use their words, is a high level of uncertainty about the figures. That's what the OBR says about the limited figures that they're using. Secondly, what we can clearly see here is a lack of understanding about how unincorporated businesses actually work, where they pass assets down through the generations. They often have been there for several generations, expect to be there for several generations. This, at the random moment of a death, and it could be a young death, it could be two elderly deaths in succession, multiple impacts at unknown times, that takes to up to 20% of the capital value out of what that person owned in that business. I've been doing a lot of work over the last decade over how we actually have improved productivity, how we have improved growth in the rural economy, how we have the investment that we will need to manage climate change, to that, the new technologies, investing in those for the benefit of the future, the reinvestment in fixed equipment to be more efficient. How is that money found? How is that money to be serviced if you take this value out either as an upfront capital sum requiring disposal of land or preempting the ability to pay because you're taking almost all of farm's income for 10 years? Neither of those are attractive. And so we went in prepared with the big solution of the clawback, but talking about all the various issues. Those were on the table to be looked at without response. And that, I think, underlines what has been said by those who've spoken before me. We went with a solution and there was no sign. Having a consultation properly to understand the impact, how the reliefs they've offered actually fit with the capital values and incomes of the farms they will bear on, would be a very positive way forward. Having a more open mind to understand the world to which these measures apply forward. Those we are happy to respond to, those we are already submitting figures and assistance, but it remains unaltered. And that is where we are at this morning. Thank you.
I think one of the most challenging elements.
There you go. That's representatives from the different farming groups, not least of all the National Farmers Union there. Tom Bradshaw, almost emotional at one stage during that press conference, certainly angry, cross, I think he described his feelings today following that meeting of farming representatives with the government trying to deal with his inheritance tax issue. There was talk there about a government that was based on ideology, and that when solutions were provided by the farming groups, it was met without response. We will, of course, hear from what the government has to say a little later on, but it is clear that those farmers are not happy today, and we seem as far away from a solution on this issue as we ever have. I'd say you get more on that on the Sky News app, or indeed you can follow that press conference on the Sky News website. Let's move on to the other big story today, and that is Thames Water, which has been given a £3 billion lifeline this morning. The UK's biggest water company is struggling with some 16 billion quid's worth of debt. The £3 billion loan, approved by the High Court this morning, will buy the company some time to sort its finances as it tries to ward off possible nationalisation. Let's speak to Gurpreet Narwan, our economics and business correspondent, who's been following this from central London. Just give us a sense of what came out of that decision this morning.
Well, you called it a lifeline, Darren. I think some others would describe this as a sticking plaster. Thames Water limping on, the company which has been struggling under the weight of a £16 billion debt pile, said it would run out of money by the end of March. It was seeking, as you said, a £3 billion loan from its most senior class of creditors, which it said would buy it some time, allowing it to seek new equity investment, giving it the opportunity to try and get its house in order. The High Court today approved that plan. It means that Thames Water has staved off, for now at least, something known as a special administration, which is akin to a temporary nationalisation. That, of course, would have been a hugely significant moment. It would have marked the first time that one of the water utilities passed back into government hands since privatisation in the late 1980s. But some pointing out that they believe is Thames' ultimate fate, that the company, which is labouring under these huge debts, needs to start afresh with a new board and new governance, that some of this debt needs to be written off to really give the company a fresh shot. And they point out that this new loan that it secured is being paid back at an interest rate of 9.75%. When you consider that Thames Water's annual debt interest bill is around £900 million, that means a third of the revenue it gets from customer bills is already going towards servicing debt, and that it has a gearing ratio of about 80%. Many rightfully wondering whether more debt is really the answer, whether this is really going to get Thames back onto a sustainable path. And there are other detractors too. A second class of creditors, known as the Class B creditors, who stand to have a lot of their money wiped out through this current deal. They put forward a loan of their own, which they said was on better terms. It was on a lower interest rate of 8%. They will undoubtedly be appealing this decision. In fact, they've announced that they will be appealing this decision. So a lot of infighting going on between the financiers as well, and all the while customers are feeling shortchanged. Their bills are already going up. Ofwat has approved increases of 35% by 2030, and Thames Water in fact says that even that is not enough. They're seeking larger increases of 53%, which would take the average bill to £677 a year, and they're using about £1.5 million of this money that they're securing to appeal that decision. So no wonder then some sceptical about this loan, pointing out that a huge chunk of it is going to bankers' fees and to lawyers' fees. Thames Water say that actually higher bills are necessary in order to fund critical investment in the network, and also to attract new equity investment from investors, which I think is just another sign of how the interests of ordinary customers and of financial investors have diverged so wildly, begging the question, who does this company actually serve anymore?
OK, Gurpreet, thank you very much indeed. Live for us there in central London. Now, wages have risen again, but there's been no change to unemployment. According to the Office for National Statistics, average regular pay rose to 6% in the 3 months to December. That's up from 5.6% in the previous 3 months. It means that wages outstripped inflation by 3.4%. Job vacancies were down again, a drop of 9,000 to 819,000 in the 3 months to January. But the number of workers on payrolls rose by 21,000 during January to 30.4 million. The unemployment rate remains unchanged at 4.4%. And you can get more on that, of course, on the Sky News Money blog. You can scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. Not just on that, indeed, all the business news on the Sky News website or the Sky News app. You're watching Business Live, coming up in just a couple of minutes, looking how the markets are reacting this morning. FTSE up a fraction. All the details after this quick break.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
I am Anna Botting.
It's been quite some day.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
Describe this feeling, it's incredible.
Now to California.
The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say today?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
I've never seen anything like this.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere, waiting to see what the president might do next.
I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky Security and Defence Editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
This is the game changer seat. Look, it even comes with binoculars. Flying minutes, fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back to Business Live. Let's have a look at those markets in a bit more detail then. Delighted to say we're joined by Lucy Coates, Investment Director at JM Fin. Lucy, very good morning to you. Let's start in that data we saw today about wages. And largely good news, isn't it? Because it means that we're all getting a bit better off.
Yes, indeed. I mean, wage growth is continuing to outpace inflation in both sectors, both the public and the private sector. But the Bank of England is really focused more on the private sector wage growth, which is very strong at 6.2%. And that looks sort of slightly alarming, given we all want rates to be cut. But actually, the Bank of England did say, when it cut rates earlier this month, that it forecast private sector wage growth at 6.3%. So it is absolutely in line and slightly more favourable.
More favourable in the sense that what you think rate cuts are probably going to remain as planned. So what does that mean? 2, 3 rate cuts at some point this year, do you reckon?
Absolutely. So the market is looking at a couple of rate cuts this year. However, we sort of think it's reasonable to expect that we're going to sort of see a gradual, steady downtrend in pay growth. So you'll see pay growth starting to ease. And that may well lead to the MPC cutting rates by 3 to 4 times over the next 10 to 12 months. So we're slightly more positive on the trajectory of rate cuts
we've been talking,
than the market's expecting.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about the workplace and employment. And yet the figures today seem to be quite robust. But this is obviously ahead of that national insurance rise at the start of April.
Yes, we are seeing businesses are beginning to prepare ahead of those increase in national insurance and the minimum wage coming into effect in April. hiring intentions have weakened. Businesses are going to have to raise prices to remain online with their profitability, etc. But yes, the trend is certainly that hiring is going to start to weaken further.
And just finally, and briefly, Lucy, if you can, we are obviously going to get inflation figures tomorrow, again, quite crucial.
Quite crucial. We're expecting core inflation higher at 3.6%. That may seem alarming, but again, the Bank of England is expecting that, so there should be no concerns for the market.
Lucy, as always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, live for us there in York this morning. You're watching Business Live. Now, we're talking about inflation just then. Tomorrow, we're going to have a special edition of this programme, live from Harrogate's in a Wetherspoons, focusing on how inflation is impacting customers there and indeed around the country. And what we want you to do, because we're going to interview the head of Wetherspoons, Tim Martin, is get in touch with your question. All you need to do is go on the Sky News Money blog, scan the QR code there at the bottom of your screen, and you will be able to submit some questions that I may well ask Tim Martin on the programme tomorrow morning at 11:30. You can either WhatsApp us, email us, but you can access it all by the QR code. Very keen for you to get involved. That is tomorrow. I'm back, though, this afternoon, of course, at 4:30 for Business Live. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is Gareth with the rest of the day's headlines, including the health of the Pope and those talks in Riyadh. Stay tuned, and I'll see you later this afternoon. Goodbye.